Clevatess is a dark fantasy story filled with intense battles, rich world building, and morally complex characters. It is also regarded by many as the best fantasy anime of this year's summer season. Many of you have asked us to cover this manga on both YouTube and Facebook.
Sharing is caring.
So we're picking up right where the latest anime episode left off. After the Devil Beast King, a resurrected hero's corpse, and a former slave girl took down the bandit group known as the Ravens, even more intense moments await. Let's get started. In the next scene, Clen and the others had returned to the village of Ravens, and they were now preparing to leave. Clen took the stream splitter from Alicia's hands and said that he was going to confiscate it. He started putting it into his shadow, which made Alicia panic and shout, asking why he was doing that. He explained that the sword stands out too much, and it would be troublesome if it attracted the attention of bad people again. When the sword was fully submerged into his shadow, Alicia dropped to her knees and called it her waterfall slicer in pain. Clen told her that he would take it out again when needed, and that she should just be grateful he didn't throw it away. After packing, Null arrived at their meeting place and commented on how amazing it was that her master could use such strange techniques, which caught their attention. Clen asked her if she was done with the preparations. While carrying Luna, and with a lot of baggage strapped to her back, she answered yes. She said it felt awkward doing all this based on her own judgment, but she had gathered everything that looked like it would be useful for their journey. After that, she also showed them some clothes she had found that would fit Luna, which he was now wearing. Clen praised her for this, while Alicia pointed out, wasn't it heavy to carry all that luggage while holding Luna? Null cheerfully answered that she was fine and explained that her body strangely felt light. Because of that, Alicia thought to herself that it must really feel light, considering that many parts of her body were already missing. She also wondered if Clen might have used the bodies of the remaining bandits as replacement parts for her, then commented to herself that she didn't see anything happen since she was dead at the time. Suddenly, Null told Alicia, with eagerness, that if she wanted, she would gladly carry her sword, armor, or anything else she needed help with. She said she wanted to be of use to her, so Alicia, slightly overwhelmed, said okay and thanked her. Alicia then said that even so, she didn't have a sword or armor that she could entrust to Null. Null replied that if it was a sword she needed, Sister Carmen told her that all the good equipment was stored in Broco's desk. That made Alicia excitedly ask if that was really true, saying she might know where that is. She then told Clen that she would just get something and asked if that was okay. Clen replied that she didn't have anything anyway since he had taken her sword, and not long after, he agreed to let her get one. Alicia ran happily toward Broco's place, while Clen called after her to hurry up because they were about to leave. Null, watching Alicia run, commented that she was actually cuter than she expected, to which Clen replied that she was just stupid. After that, he pointed out that thanks to Alicia, the bandits were wiped out and the place was now deserted because the slaves had escaped. He then asked Null if she felt any regret, and she answered that she didn't really have any good memories of that place. But even so, it was still the place where she had lived with her mother, so seeing it now completely empty made her feel a little lonely. She added that if anything, she would have liked to at least say goodbye to Sister Carmen. Clen looked at her, as if he was about to start a conversation about the woman she mentioned, but they were suddenly interrupted when they heard a strange sound from above. Luna turned to look, and the others followed. When Clen looked up, he saw the mysterious man who had been watching the events earlier from a high cliff near the shaft of El Bay. The man shouted that he had finally found the little one who used strange techniques. The scene then shifted to Alicia, who had now arrived at Broco's place. She kicked the door open and headed straight for his desk. When she saw that the drawers hadn't been opened, she commented that it looked like no one had taken advantage of the earlier chaos to loot the place. Upon opening the drawer, she happily found a small pouch filled with money and said excitedly that it was a good sign. She continued rummaging through the desk, and as she did, she remarked that at this rate, she wasn't even sure who the real bandits were anymore. When she opened the bottom drawer, she found a piece of women's leather armor that made her recoil in disgust and wonder if that old man was some kind of pervert. She even started thinking that maybe it meant he himself was the one who wore it, which gave her the creeps, so she quickly pushed that thought away. She just told herself while putting it on that maybe Broko only sniffed it. She convinced herself that that's probably the case and said there's no problem in taking it. Even though she was already dead, she could still feel pain, so that was another reason for her. She added that Clen probably wouldn't mind if she took some leather armor. After she finished putting on the matching boots and bracers, she opened another drawer and found a sword. She picked it up and unsheathed it to look at its form, and when she tried swinging it, she commented that it had good balance and felt light. It wasn't one of Hayden's swords, but she said it was a good sword. She then returned it to its sheath and added that it was probably a sharp sword made by a renowned swordsmith, so she decided to settle for this one. After finishing her looting, she thought about going back to where Clen was, but unexpectedly, Clen was suddenly sent flying into the house where she was, smashing through the wall. She was completely shocked by this, and when she saw his condition, she called out to him in concern. Clen, standing up from the pile of rubble, commented how annoying it is that his small body can get blown away so easily. Alicia immediately asked, worried, who had attacked him. Suddenly, the mysterious man entered the house, instantly catching Alicia's attention. The man noticed that Clen had more companions and made a comment about it. In that moment, Alicia immediately sensed that this guy was strong. She quickly drew her sword and prepared to fight. While watching the man, she thought to herself that from the looks of it, he didn't seem to be using any weapons. Because of that, she questioned how he had managed to fling Clen so easily. When the man got closer to Alicia, he suddenly launched a high kick straight at her face. Alicia was startled, but fortunately, she managed to dodge it just in time. That's when she realized his legs were his weapons. Even though she dodged the kick, a cut suddenly appeared on her cheek, which surprised her and made her realize it wasn't just an ordinary kick. The man praised her, saying she had good eyesight for being able to avoid his attack. While she was preparing herself to counter his next moves, he added, while already charging at her, a remark about how long she'd be able to last. The man rushed at her and unleashed a flurry of fast kicks, which started to overwhelm Alicia. She also noted that even though he was attacking continuously in midair, each of his kicks still carried abnormal weight. Even so, she managed to hold her ground, prompting the man to comment that she was tough. After that, the man suddenly leapt away from her, which caught her attention. He struck a pose by raising both arms behind him and shouted that he would send her flying. It was as if he performed a motion to send wind forward, and when he did that, an incredibly strong gust of air surged toward Alicia, powerful enough to break the ground. Alicia was alarmed when she saw it, and she wasn't able to react in time, so it hit her directly, sending her flying. She was blown straight out of the house's roof, the force of the impact clear for all to see. Nello became extremely worried upon seeing her soaring through the air. Alicia landed on the roof of a nearby house, then fell down to the ground afterward, which made Nello shout in fear even louder. The man followed her and jumped out from the hole he had made when he sent her flying, and when he landed in front of her, he remarked again that she really was tough. While Alicia forced herself to stand back up despite being beaten down, the man added that he only had business with the small one, so he would turn a blind eye if she withdrew. Alicia responded by questioning the idea of turning a blind eye, and said she didn't know if he was a bandit survivor, but added that he'd better not underestimate a hero. She raised her sword again right after and took a stance, ready to charge. Because of this, the man commented that she looked eager to die, while she thought to herself that if the following technique still wouldn't work, then it was time to use the waterfall slicer. After thinking that, she braced herself, and the man was surprised by her stance. Right after, she charged like a swift serpent, and with incredible speed, she was suddenly in front of the man, which shocked him. She called this move her secret technique, Rising Dragon. The man was caught off guard by that movement, so all he could do was brace for the impact of her swift strike, visibly alarmed. However, just as her weapon was about to strike the man's head, it suddenly stopped, surprising him, and even she didn't seem to understand what had happened. It turned out that Clen had interfered and was controlling her, telling her to stop. As Clen approached her, he paused for a moment and then suddenly hit her on the head, which made her cry out in pain. Confused, she asked what that was for, and Clen asked her if she shut out everything except for the intention to kill. She explained that that's just how the technique works, and asked why he stopped her. Clen explained that the man was only being hostile because of a misunderstanding. That's why he stopped her. Alicia questioned that explanation, so Clen pointed out that if he hadn't stopped her, her body would have been torn to shreds by that guy's legs. Right after, the man decided to leave them alone and told them that if what they were saying was true, they should explain themselves. The man then asked why they, especially the woman carrying the baby, Nellel, reeked so strongly of a Western troll. This made Nellel panic and feel self-conscious, bothered by the idea that she smelled. She asked if it could be because she had been swallowed, and that's when the man added that he had heard about a small man who could control a troll, which was why he came. He continued, saying that just recently, he found the corpse of a troll underground, its body destroyed, limbs torn apart, its face and guts scattered brutally. He then turned his gaze toward Clen and asked if he wasn't that small man who killed the troll. That's when Clen understood the situation and immediately ordered Nellel to take Luna and wait at the camp entrance, which Nellel obeyed right away without hesitation. After Nellel had moved far enough away, Alicia asked Clen if it was fine for Nellel to be the only one who leaves and if she should go too, but Clen told her to stay. Clen then told her that the man standing in front of them was a devil beast, which surprised the man with Clen's speculation, and added that although it had taken on the shape of a human, it was something entirely different inside. The man, irritated, asked what Clen was talking about, while Alicia was stunned and found it hard to believe what she had just heard. Clen added that the man had a powerful enough illusion that even he couldn't see its true form, but there was no doubt that it had claws and wings. He further explained that there was only one being capable of creating such strong illusions, the Devil Beast King of the Grand Forest of the West, Zaftir of the Mist. While he said this, we're shown an image of what that creature looks like. Alicia became even more concerned upon hearing that name, and she added that incidentally, that female Beast King was known to be on bad terms with Clevatess of the Moonlight. After that, the man spoke with irritation, saying it looked like Clen wasn't the one he was searching for. Still, he questioned how Clen knew so much and asked who he really was, calling him a bastard. Clen introduced himself as Clen and explained that he had borrowed a hominid form, or humanoid form, just like the man had, and said he was a servant of one of the kings. Alicia was shocked when he lied and thought to herself that maybe he was trying to hide his identity, which also reminded her that he didn't want his absence to be known. The man seemed to understand and responded that, in that case, Clen must be a servant of Clevatess. He added that, in theory, they weren't supposed to act friendly toward each other, but it seemed like their goals aligned. Right after saying that, the man suddenly transformed into a giant monstrous bird and added that he had heard Clevatess had flattened one of the hominid capitals. He pointed out that Lady Zaftir wanted the same thing. Apparently, she was considering the annihilation of the hominids. The giant bird introduced himself as Guard, a servant of Zaftir. He admitted to Clen that he had guessed right in suspecting that he was indeed a servant of Lady Zaftir, one of the four kings. And since he had revealed his true form, he asked Clen to show his true form as well to prove that he was also a devil beast. Clen agreed to Gart's request and revealed a bit of himself. From his own shadow, he summoned one of his many tails and asked Gart if what he had shown was enough to serve as proof. Gart was satisfied with this and reverted back to his human form. Because of that, he told Clen's group that there was no longer any reason for them to fight for now. After a moment of silence, Alicia suddenly became distressed upon realizing that she now knew two devil beasts capable of shape-shifting into a hominid form and speaking the hominid language. She was stunned to learn that Clen wasn't the only one who could do that. It made her wonder if perhaps some devil beasts were already walking among them in disguise without the hominids even realizing it. If that were the case, it meant that all the heroes were completely unaware of the place where the real battle was happening. As she was about to unsheath her sword, Alicia questioned whether the world of the hominids was smaller than they had assumed. Then she was caught off guard when Clen suddenly referred to her as his servant. Clen told her not to worry, because only a few devil beasts could shapeshift into a hominid form and speak their language. Alicia was shocked to find out that Clen could read her mind. Clen added that even Zaftir, who could also shapeshift, would never get involved with hominids without a reason. According to Clen, Zaftir looked down on the hominids, which is why she wouldn't want to disgrace herself by speaking to or mingling with them. Gart agreed with what he said, and then asked for an explanation about why he had heard Alicia earlier referring to herself as a hero. After all, heroes were the mortal enemies of devil beasts. So, he also asked why Clen and Alicia were traveling together. With a mixture of eagerness and hostility, Gart demanded an explanation from Clen, whom he still didn't know is actually Clevatess. Clen answered truthfully and said that Alicia was indeed a hero, but now she was his servant. And because she was under his spell, she could not oppose him. Alicia served as his guide in his journey to learn about the hominid world, in addition to acting as his shield. Even Nello and Luna served him in his learning journey. Then, Clen told Gart that he wasn't obligated to provide more details to an outsider like him. Gart understood what Clen was saying. He was already convinced and admitted that he was only curious about what Clen meant when he referred to the absolute part. Then Gart warned Clen that if any of his servants became an obstacle to him in any way, he would kill them. Clen agreed, but also told him that he would not allow Gart to do that. Then, he said it was his turn to ask Gart something. Clen requested an explanation from him about what he meant when he mentioned Zaftir's thoughts about annihilating all hominids. According to Clen, from what he knew of Zaftir, she was the strange one among them because she loved the hominids. In fact, he knew that there was a group of hominids known as the Org, who lived in the forest of the west and worshipped Zaftir as a goddess. That's why he was confused about her change of heart. Alicia also knew about this, and it was the reason why heroes avoided going to the west. However, it was impossible for anyone to travel west without the cooperation of the Org. So, she wondered if something had recently happened in the west. To explain the reason properly to Clen, Gart began to recount what happened around 3 days ago. He was flying high in the airspace of Devil Beast territory during his patrol rounds. At the time, he noticed something strange about 2 griffin-like beasts on the ground in the forest of the west. He landed on a tree branch to take a closer look. He saw that the 2 beasts were circling and howling loudly, so he wondered if they were looking for a missing child. From what he observed, it didn't seem like their child had been eaten by another creature. The 2 parents just looked confused, as if their child had suddenly disappeared. Gart's intuition told him something strange was going on, and he noticed something shimmering on the ground below him. When he approached it, he found a mysterious vial that appeared to have been used before, though it still contained a small amount of liquid. He immediately brought it to Lady Zaftir and reported that he found it in a nearby area. Gart told Zaftir that he believed something strange had been happening in their territory for some time now. If he remembered correctly, this was already the 9th mysterious disappearance case. According to Gart, some beasts were capable of speech, and the case of a young one being eaten by a predator was not that unusual. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on in these recent missing cases. Zaftir remained silent. Then Gart added that even though he didn't know the suspect's objective, he still believed that hominids were behind these incidents. Zaftir didn't take this well, especially since they had assumed they'd already established a good relationship with the Org. She said it was a bad omen, and as she said this, she revealed a glimpse of her true form as a demon lady. Gart then asked her if they should summon the leader of the Org, but Zaftir rejected his suggestion, saying that they couldn't be trusted. Zaftir said they had to keep this as confidential information and that Gart should investigate the hominid world first. And depending on the outcome, Zaftir's decision could lead to the annihilation of the hominids. That was the gist of Gart's story. Clen was deep in thought, surprised that Zaftir had considered this matter before he had. And just as he was about to say something about his master, Gart suddenly interrupted him. Gart said that maybe they just hadn't noticed it yet, but the young ones from the Devil Beast territory in the southern mountains under Clen might also be starting to disappear. That was the reason he had come here, to look for clues. Clen told him that he had killed a small man who had tamed a western troll. And because the troll became hostile toward him, he had no choice but to kill it too. Gart understood that there was no other way to deal with it if it had attacked Clen. Clen paused for a moment, and then said that he thought there was a possibility that what was happening wasn't limited to beasts alone. Alicia was stunned when she heard this, and Gart also asked what Clen meant by it. So, to explain it better, Clen told a story about what he had heard from a hominid woman, none other than Carmen. The two had a confrontation inside an inn after Clen learned about Nell's past. Carmen was backed into the corner of the inn out of fear of Clen's piercing gaze. There, she told Clen about the pointlessness of women giving birth in their place. That was because men would come to buy their babies from the ravens. Clen's eyes widened with anger at what Carmen said, and he asked her about the men she was referring to. Nervously and stressed, Carmen admitted that she didn't really know who they were. All she knew was that the men wore black robes and bought babies from Broco, and that their conversations always involved something about suitability. She had only seen Broco meet with them once and knew nothing else. But there was one thing Carmen was sure of. The men in black robes scared Broco. Clen said it was strange to learn that all 3 of the babies Nello had given birth to were stillborn. So, he asked Carmen if she had killed them. Carmen admitted to doing so, but said it was the rule among the women in the ravens. Since any baby they gave birth to would just be taken and sold anyway, and they had no way of knowing who the father was, they always did their best to avoid getting pregnant, just to protect what little pride they had left. According to Carmen, Nello was stupid for not being like them. That's why she killed the babies and buried them on the hill behind the camp. She said they didn't do it because they wanted to. Clen simply glared at her, and Luna, who he was carrying, suddenly began to cry. Carmen seemed to show a sudden wave of guilt upon hearing the baby cry. Clen said he understood what Carmen had said, but argued that Nell was born and raised in that place. Trusting his intuition, Clen told Carmen that he believed Nell's mother had managed to hide her well until she reached an age where she could no longer be sold. Then, he emphasized that Carmen had made a different decision from Nell's mother. After saying this, he walked away, leaving Carmen with guilt. After telling that story, Clen said to Garth that he believed there was a possibility that, even if they didn't appear directly connected, the case of hominids buying babies and the case of hominids abducting young beasts were still related. The ones buying babies were doing business with a small man from the ravens named Broco, and that small man was the same one who had managed to tame a troll. Clen couldn't picture Broco capturing an adult troll, and because of the part about aptitude, when both cases are laid side by side, it becomes clearer that they're deeply tied to something referred to as the dark arts. Gart and Alicia were visibly shocked by Clen's frightening theory. So when Clen softly called Alicia's name, she was startled. Clen noticed from her expression that she seemed to be thinking about the dark arts, so he asked her about it. Alicia found it difficult to answer, and simply said that, as she had mentioned before, she didn't have any dark arts she could perform. So, she didn't know much about them. However, she did recall a group related to them. Clen asked what group that was, and Alicia told him it was a group of users of dark arts. They were the wizards, and they used the dark arts as a tool for war. According to Alicia's information, the wizards had been standing out for several years due to how they shifted the course of the war happening in the Plains of Dorne. Nowadays, the wizards held a lot of influence in determining which side would hold the upper hand on the battlefield. And as Alicia explained this, we are shown the current battle, where we see a wizard holding a black orb runestone. He threw it high into the air using its handle, and it was seen by many enemy troops. Within just a second, multiple soldiers simultaneously received piercing thrusts to their chests from the runestone hurled into the sky by the wizard. The cocky wizard even smiled at the success of his move. But then, he was caught off guard when a ball was thrown at him and struck his left shoulder. It immediately exploded in his face, releasing thick smoke containing an acidic element. It quickly melted his skin, flesh from his entire head and neck, leaving only the skull. According to Alicia, the very first hominid to bring dark arts onto the battlefield was a general known by his nickname, the Dragon Slayer. That general was Dorell from the Kingdom of Bolet. Dorell currently led a massive army that included giant war mammoth beasts, towering in size. They were heading toward their objective, the border fort of Hyden, or more commonly known as Highgate. Dorell had his eyes set on it, and was determined to get what he wanted. After Carmen had explained everything to Clen earlier, she also finally admitted that the real reason she was so bothered upon hearing about the dark arts was because Dorell was the man who had killed her father. Alicia still harbored intense hatred over what happened to her father. Clen noticed this and remarked that even though she had someone she wanted revenge on, she still joined a mission to kill him. Alicia was left speechless by this, but she still managed to explain that it was because of his father's will. Meanwhile, deep in a forest, we see a cavalryman racing back to her camp. Upon arrival, she immediately called out to Rod, a young man with a well-groomed look and spiked hair. That cavalryman turned out to be a woman with freckles on her face, and her name was Mikkel. Rod asked her what was going on, and she quickly reported that their advance party had been completely crushed. On top of that, the entire army of the Kingdom of Bolet, led by General Dorel, was continuing to march southward. According to Mikkel, Dorel's army was now nearly 50,000 strong. Rod understood that this meant Dorel truly intended to take over the entirety of Haydn. The problem, Rod noted, was that they had at most only 6,000 soldiers in their camp. In addition, their army didn't have enough wizards. So even if they deployed all their troops, they would never be able to stall the Bolet army. Mikkel dismounted from her horse and asked Rod if reinforcements from their main force could help. Rod answered that it would take 3 more days before they arrived. So now, Rod crouched down to the ground and grabbed Mikkel's attention to explain his plan using a stick to draw in the dirt. In the illustration he carved, he explained that Dorel's army was here in the north, advancing straight toward Highgate. According to Rod, if they could enter through the west gate on the Estland side, they could reinforce the fort's doors. Even though they were few in number compared to the enemy, the fortification they could provide would have a significant impact due to the fort having a large gate on the east side and a small gate on the west side. However, in order to execute this plan effectively, they would need Haydn's cooperation. Rod had already sent a messenger to Haydn, but until now, he had not received any kind of response. Because of that, Rod told Mikkel that he suspected things must be in utter chaos inside Haydn. Mikkel then asked if the rumor she'd heard was true, about Clevatess attacking Haydn and taking down its castle. Rod replied that, at this point, they had no choice but to believe it. That was also the reason General Dorel was now on the offensive with the Kingdom of Bolet's main force. Then Rod's eyes grew extremely serious as he told Mikkel that he suspected Dorel was aiming to seize the Haydn royal family's furnace. Rod explained that his own precious sword, named Snowflower, as well as the magic swords used by Mikkel and their officer, couldn't have been forged without the use of that furnace. Mikkel understood the situation well and knew it would be a huge problem. If Dorel got what he wanted, they wouldn't be able to obtain quality swords anymore. Rod said that wasn't the only issue. Mikkel asked what else he meant. So Rod explained that the Haydn royal family's furnace was recognized as the world's oldest tool for dark arts. That meant, for people developing sorcery, the secrets of the Haydn furnace were things they desperately want to obtain. And we know that one of the biggest players in dark arts sorcery in the world is none other than Dorel himself. Rod admitted that he didn't know much about sorcery, but what he was saying was based on what the people from the dark arts department in their kingdom had told him. With visible anxiety and concern, Mikkel said that the Bolet kingdom already had the biggest advantage in terms of dark arts fighting power. So, if they managed to steal the Haydn furnace as well, they'd all be in danger. Not just the kingdom of Estland, but the entire land of Ethia would fall into Bolet's hands. Because of this, Rod looked intently at Mikkel and said this was exactly why they needed to stop General Dorel's army, whatever it takes. Then, another cavalryman arrived and called Rod Commander Lois. Rod asked if there was a problem and whether their messenger had returned. The cavalryman replied that the report wasn't about that. Nervously sweating and pale with worry, he reported that instead of the west gate of Highgate opening as they had hoped, the east gate had opened instead. Rod shouted what? In disbelief. And as we shift to the currently opening east gate, we see a vast number of fallen troops inside the territory of Haydn. And there, only one man on horseback remained standing. But upon zooming in, it's clear that this man was not from Haydn. He was the wizard who had earlier accompanied Dorel during their scouting mission. The wizard had intimidating eyes. It turns out he was the one who had opened the gate to welcome the approaching Bolet army, saying, "Sorry for the wait," to General Dorel. Dorel immediately asked him for a report, and he confirmed the death of the king of Haydn and the survival of the crown princess, who had been elsewhere when the tragedy happened. But, according to the wizard, their problem was the king's 6-month-old son. That baby was the only one who had inherited the royal family's blood. And according to the last eyewitness who saw the infant, before the child's whereabouts became unknown, a young page had been seen escaping Haydn with the baby. Dorel asked him if he was saying he lost the baby. He replied yes, but he had also received information about a hidden baby who had been seen by a group called the Ravens. He already knew the hidden baby was with a young boy who resembled the young page, so he suggested that he check it personally. Dorel agreed and immediately sent him, none other than the strongest wizard of the Bullet Army, Maynard Swan. Dorel entrusted to Maynard the task of bringing Luna to him before he could get to Hydrat. A flashback to 2 years ago in Sogo Village. Alicia, still a young woman back then, was crying as she repeatedly called out to her father. He was covered in blood and lying helplessly on the ground. She desperately tried to get him up, but it was clear from his condition that he was already beyond saving. The only thing he could do was say the name of his daughter, Alicia. Alicia cried her heart out over what had happened to her father. Standing behind them was General Dorel, who remarked that with just a sword, there's a wall that you cannot pass. Alicia was confused by what he meant. He added that from that moment on, it would be the age of the sword and dark arts. While holding his sword, he declared that he had triumphed over a man who had mastered the sword. He said he wanted to claim that his dark arts were now perfect, but admitted they still weren't enough. Alicia turned to him and asked if he really just fought her father, who had already retired, just to prove something. She demanded to know who he thought he was. He raised his sword and introduced himself as Dorel. With a single swing of his blade, the ground suddenly split into 3. The impact even reached their house, which was split all the way up to the ceiling. Alicia was stunned by what she witnessed. Dorel then admitted that he used to be a friend of her father and that what he was truly after was true strength. He then left, and Alicia could only watch him as he walked away. Unable to accept what had happened to her father, Alicia called out to him and reached for his father's sword. But before she could grab it, he stopped her, something that caught her by surprise. Her father told her to stop. He said Dorel came from the army and was a warmonger. If she fought him, she would definitely be dragged into that war. And war, he said, was the farthest thing from the path of a true hero. Wars were merely rifts in the world of humanity. That was why he begged her not to fight Dorel. He took Alicia's hands in his and reminded her that she was supposed to become a hero, that she would someday see what lay beyond their world. He pleaded with the crying Alicia to show that to her father as well. And soon after saying that, he passed away. Overwhelmed by everything, Alicia couldn't help but scream in frustration and sob uncontrollably. Those were the last words her father had spoken. The scene then shifted to the present, where Clen was resting outside. He stared at the cup in his hand and wondered about its contents. He asked Nello what the hot black water was. Nello answered that it was coffee and called him master. She said it was expensive and that her former boss, Broco, often drank it. She had heard that it was made from beans harvested beyond the East Sea, in Slada. She also mentioned that she added a lot of sugar to it since it helped relieve exhaustion. Clen first smelled it and remarked how hominids always came up with such strange things. When he tasted it, the heat surprised him and burned his tongue. He had forgotten that even his tongue wasn't that resistant. When he set the cup down, Luna became curious about it. He tried to grab the cup, but Clen quickly got to it first and told him not to touch it. He warned that his tongue would get burned. Nello then asked where the scary person had gone. Clen wondered if she was referring to Gart. Apparently, Gart had told him he would report first about the dark arts and wizards he had learned about. That was what he said before flying off. Nello was surprised by the mention of him flying. Clen insisted that Gart no longer suspected her, so there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. Still, while sipping more coffee, he said he should start thinking about what they would do next. Eventually, Clen came to appreciate the coffee and said its aroma wasn't bad. Nello was pleased to hear that. Just then, Alicia arrived and called out to Clen. She said she had heard something from a merchant in town. As expected, something terrible was happening in that country. The neighboring nation of Bolet had attacked the western border and was now advancing on Haydn. Clen asked if this meant war. Of course, she answered. Haydn had the capacity to fight in a war, but with their king dead and the capital lost, the status quo was gone. Haydn did have first-class weapons, but they lacked wizards. When Clen asked why that was, Alicia explained that the king had banned the use of dark arts within the country. She didn't know the reason, but that might be why he himself knew nothing about dark arts. After all, Haydn was the only country close to Moon Mountain. Clen agreed. Alicia brought out a map. She opened it and pointed to Clyn that they were currently in Shiron, the closest town from the mineshaft of El Bay. She also pointed to a town northeast of the capital, Hydrat. Bolet had avoided the impassable mountain ranges and attacked from the west border, which was the farthest point from where they were. According to her, it would take her a day and a half to reach the border if she were in a hurry and riding a horse, but if traveling on foot, it would take them 2 weeks. They were 2 days away from Hydrat, and if they went there, they would definitely get caught up in the war. Bolet's army could reach Hydrat in a week. Nello handed Alicia a cup of coffee, calling her Miss Hero. Alicia was shocked to find that it was coffee. Nello insisted she had poured her heart into making it. Seeing her reaction, Clyn asked if this was her first time drinking coffee. Annoyed, Alicia told him to shut up. For someone like her who grew up in a village, coffee was something she couldn't just obtain. She took a sip and remarked on how sweet it was. She told Nello it tasted delicious. She had expected it to be bitter. Nello was happy to hear that, and admitted she had intentionally sweetened it. While they were talking, Luna was reaching for and playing with the map. So Nello picked him up and said it was time for him to eat. She left with the child and told Luna they should not disturb them since they were busy. They moved away to avoid being a bother. Luna was absolutely delighted by this, which led Alicia to comment that it had been a good decision to save Nello. She noted how thoughtful Nello was, and that somehow, just seeing her always put her in a good mood. Clyn responded that even if Alicia didn't have a single feminine point about her besides her looks, there's still no chance for her to have a child with Nell. Alicia was surprised by what he said and insisted that she wasn't looking at her that way. When Clyn asked what she meant, Alicia explained that it was the first time she had ever won someone's smile using her sword. She said she was happy to have finally done something that felt heroic. She told him not to force her into saying any more and suggested they just return to the main topic. She picked up the map and asked what they were going to do from this point on. He had mentioned wanting to make Luna the king, but now it was only a matter of time before the nation itself would be completely wiped out. All of it was because someone had destroyed the capital. From Clyn's point of view, he didn't see what difference it would make if Haydn became Bolet. He asked what the problem was with that. Alicia asserted that once Bolet ruled over Haydn, Luna, who came from the Haydn race, would never be king. Clyn was troubled upon hearing that and admitted it would indeed be a problem. Alicia added that Luna would definitely be captured once he was found. There were only a few children left with pure Haydn blood, and people would immediately recognize him as someone from the royal bloodline. If Haydn disappeared, Luna would also lose his place in the world of the hominids. Meanwhile, Nello was peacefully nursing Luna under a tree. Alicia went on to say that, as she had mentioned before, only the royal family of Haydn possessed the secret of magic or refining. That appeared to be what Bolet was truly after, and there was only one person capable of mobilizing Bolet's army to make that happen. Clyn already knew that she was referring to the dragon slayer, Dorel. That was right, Alicia replied. Dorel had even gone out of his way to hunt down her father, who had already retired and was living in secrecy, just to kill him. There was no doubt he wouldn't stop until he found Luna too. If he wanted Luna to survive in this world, then they had no choice but to fight the Bolet army and protect Haydn. Clyn, however, was extremely annoyed. He still had to protect people he had already decided he would one day destroy. He then stood up and began preparing to leave. When Alicia asked if he was going, she volunteered to join, but Clyn didn't allow her to come along. He told her to stay there and protect Luna and Nell. Alicia couldn't accept that and asked him why. Clyn explained that he didn't want people to know that he, the Devil Beast King, was acting in the interest of one particular side. He needed to have a valid reason to go there. Thankfully, those people gave him a good enough reason, the wizards and Dorel. If they were secretly abducting young Beast, it would only be natural for a Devil Beast King like him to investigate. And while he's there, he would also assess the power of those they called wizards. He said he understood Alicia's eagerness and her grudge over what had happened to her father, but she was out this time. She was to stay there obediently. Alicia had no choice but to yield. Besides, hadn't she already said she wouldn't fight that man? She said that was true. She had made a promise to her father, because war was the opposite of a hero's path. But she was no longer a hero now. She was just a corpse that continued to move, thanks to his blood. She just thought that it would be fine to at least avenge his father. Clyn then asked if she herself had decided whether she was a hero or not. Or perhaps it was the king. Was someone a hero just because they held a sword? And did they have to kill a devil beast to be called one? First of all, why had she even chosen to be a hero? Alicia paused to think, then answered that it was to make the world a better place. Clyn remarked that she had indeed made Nellle's world better. Was that the reason she said earlier that she had done something heroish? Alicia fell silent at his words. Besides, Clyn didn't recall ever telling her to stop being a hero. But he also said he wouldn't stop her if she wanted to give it up. He walked away as he said this. However, Alicia stopped him to say that his enemy was an army. 2 years ago, Dorel was already stronger than she is now. So she told him to be careful. He confidently replied by asking who she thought he was. Meanwhile, Nella was busy keeping an eye on little Luna. Luna was stacking stones on top of one another, and Nella was delighted by what he had managed to do. Moments later, a strong gust of wind suddenly blew through. As a result, Luna was knocked over and the stack of stones collapsed. Nella was puzzled by the powerful wind, while Luna simply giggled as he lay on the ground. Alicia then approached them, and Nella asked if their master had already left. Alicia replied yes, that he just had something to take care of. She said they would just look for an inn in town and wait for him there. And from what she knew about him, he would definitely return quickly, even if they don't want him to. Clyn, having returned to his original form, traveled swiftly. After a short while, he sensed something unusual, prompting him to lift himself high into the air, rising even higher than the surrounding trees. He landed atop a tall cliff and let out a growl. From there, he began surveying the area around him. At the second fort of Haydn, the gate had already been destroyed due to the overwhelming force of the massive army unit that had stormed it. That group was led by General Dorel along with the forces of Bolet. Their goal was to infiltrate and conquer Haydn as quickly as possible before anyone else could get ahead of them. Not far from there, Rod and Mikkel were hurrying. They noticed that Dorel's army had already broken through the second fort. The ease and extent with which they had done it was alarming. Mikkel asked what they were going to do now. The enemy was moving freely behind the border. If their momentum continued, they would undoubtedly reach Hydrak quickly. Their reinforcements would never make it in time. Rod replied that they had no choice. There was a wide but shallow river up ahead. That's where they would stop them. He called on everyone to get ready. The small army accompanying him followed immediately. Elsewhere, someone else had been observing the events from a distance. One of the surviving Haydnians. Concerned by what he had seen, he decided to act. Mounted on his horse, he rode off in the opposite direction. Back in town, Alicia and Nellel had arrived. Alicia pointed out where the inn was, and Nellel followed along, carrying Luna in her arms. As they walked through the area, a small bug was discreetly observing and trailing them. It turned out to belong to Maynard. Because of this, he declared that they had found the child. It turned out that Maynard had deployed a large number of what he called cute little insects. According to him, their objective was the Prince of Haydn. After giving them a briefing, he released them to begin the search. A massive swarm of these insects was sent out for the mission. Back in the town where Nellel and Alicia had gone, as they walked through the area, they noticed that Luna had fallen asleep. Not far off, Alicia spotted a commotion. A man was being beaten up by a group. They were kicking him repeatedly, even as the man begged them to stop. They called him a lowly bandit, accusing him of being shameless for walking around there in broad daylight. They insisted that Shiron was a woodworker's town. They asked how many times they had to warn them, cursing him and calling him a bastard. The man didn't fight back and continued to plead with them to stop. He tried to explain that he had only run away. Alicia then remarked that it looked like some of the surviving ravens had come there. Nellel's face clearly showed concern over what they were witnessing, something Alicia noticed when she glanced at her. She could see Nellel trembling, still frightened by those men. Alicia smiled at her and reassured her not to worry. No one there would recognize her anymore. She then urged her to leave and take a different path. Alicia took one more glance at the man being beaten, who continued to beg the group to stop, swearing he wouldn't do anything bad again. The man suddenly froze when he noticed something, and that was Alicia. He pointed at her and recognized her. He remembered the octopus in their old hideout and exclaimed that she was the hero who had fought it. He tried to explain further, but the group struck him across the face. Irritated, they asked if he was mocking them. If a hero were still alive, then their country wouldn't be in such a mess. Alicia overheard this and became uneasy. The group no longer cared about the man and decided they would just hang him as well. Because of what they said, Alicia covered her face, and they continued walking. The beaten man begged them to stop again, but he was powerless as they tied his body to a tree. And he wasn't the only one. Several other bodies were already hanging there. One of the men mentioned they had caught 9 ravens so far in that place, and they were surprised by how many there were. Another speculated that a giant octopus might have shown up near the Elbe mine shaft. They wondered if it could be an ancient beast. Fearful, they started to question what was happening to their country. All they were hearing lately were terrifying reports, like the attack from Clevatess and the Bolid army's advance. Things were truly getting frightening. Still, no matter what happened, they swore they would protect their town. They said they would arm anyone who could fight, young or old. Meanwhile, Alicia and Nello proceeded to the inn. Before entering, Alicia noticed that everyone around them seemed tense. She then asked a favor from Nello, whom she called Nelly. When Nello asked what it was, Alicia said she wanted her to call her Alicia instead of Hero while they were in that town. Nello asked if she didn't like being called that, but Alicia said that wasn't the case. It was just better to keep her identity hidden for now. Alicia then opened the door to the inn, and inside were 2 men standing guard. They were surprised by her entrance and looked confused. They blocked the doorway and asked who they were. One of them approached and said he hoped she wasn't a bandit. Alicia denied it, while Nello stood nervously behind her. The bar lady then told the men to stop. It turned out she was their mother. She told them they'd wake the baby. This prompted them to look more closely and notice that Alicia and Nello were indeed carrying a peacefully sleeping child. Still, one of the men complained that Alicia had a sword and wore an eye patch. His brother agreed, but their mother replied that, in times like these, no one could walk outside without carrying a sword. She told Phil that even though he was big, he lacked guts, just like his father. As for Pete, she told him to fix his habit of just saying yeah whenever he got nervous. She then apologized to Alicia and introduced herself as Gari, the landlady. She asked if she was right in guessing that the child was of pure hide and blood. She had noticed the light red hair and pointed ears, saying it was rare to see a pure blood in the countryside. For now, Gari asked them to explain who they were. Depending on their answer, she said she might have her 2 idiot sons kick them out. Alicia and Nello struggled to answer at first, but Alicia firmly said they were guards working for someone important and that their mission was to protect the child. Gari considered her response. In Alicia's mind, she wasn't lying. Moments later, Gari accepted them, much to the surprise of her sons. She figured their master must be a noble who had fled from Hydrat. Gari said she didn't care where that noble planned to flee. As long as they paid, then they would help them. She asked what they needed, alcohol or food. Alicia requested a room, a bed where the child could sleep safely, and if possible, food for 2 people. Gari replied that it would cost 2 silver for the night, with an advance payment for 2 days required. Alicia agreed and handed over the silver coins. Gari thanked her and pointed to the stairs, telling them to go up and that their room would be the first one on the right. Alicia peeked at the room before thanking her. Phil then warned them to watch themselves, saying they didn't trust strangers around there. His brother Pete agreed, but Gari suddenly kicked Phil and told him to quit fooling around and start carrying their luggage. Phil winced in pain, and Gari muttered that this was exactly why women didn't like them. "Look at that," she said. There was no way a woman could carry all that stuff up and down the stairs by herself. But Nello said it was fine, she could manage. However, following their mother's orders, Pete lifted the chest from her back and insisted on carrying it himself. He was clearly flustered as he told her he'd handle it. Phil grew annoyed, saying he wanted to help too, but had been beaten to it. When Nello removed their belongings from her back and Pete took them, he didn't expect how heavy they were. He struggled with the weight and told his brother to stop just watching and help him. Phil, now curious, asked what was wrong. Meanwhile, when Alicia asked Nello, whom she called Nelly, if she was glad, and she answered yes. The 2 brothers carried their luggage up to the room, and once they set everything down, they were completely exhausted. Curiosity got the better of them as they wondered what could possibly be inside. Pete thought surely the boxes themselves were heavy, unbelievably so. Alicia was surprised to hear that. Inside the room, Gari asked if they liked it. Alicia answered yes, she really did. She was impressed by the iron beds. And since they were probably wondering why a woodworker's town would have iron beds, Gari explained that decades ago, they had crafted chairs for the castle, and the king had sent the beds as a token of gratitude. But now, she couldn't believe the chaos happening. The king was dead, and the war had already begun. She was worried about what might come next. Alicia apologized, and Gari asked what she was apologizing for. In any case, she told them to relax and let her know if they needed anything. She then stepped out and closed the door. Nello suggested they lay Luna down on the bed for now, and Alicia agreed. Alicia set her sword down beside the bed. A short while later, night had fallen. When Alicia opened the window, she noticed how dark it was already. From their room, the moon mountain was clearly visible. It made her wonder what Clevatess might be doing now, and whether he had already reached the battlefield. She turned to check on Nello and asked how Luna was doing. Nello replied that she thought he would wake up soon. She then showed something to Alicia, pointing to Luna's mouth and gently lowering his lip to reveal that his first tooth had come out. Alicia leaned in and commented on how tiny it was. The two were overjoyed, marveling at how small and cute Luna was. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Gari. She informed them that their food was ready. If they preferred to eat in the room, they could just come and get it. The two agreed, and since Luna was likely to wake up soon, Alicia volunteered to go and fetch the meal. As Alicia stepped out, Gari apologized, saying it could get a bit noisy there at night. Downstairs, Gari told her she had left their food at the counter, so she should just go ahead and take it. One of the customers took notice of Alicia and asked Gari who the woman was. Gari simply replied that Alicia isn't suited for him. She added that the woman had a child, so he shouldn't even think about trying anything. The man was completely shocked to hear that. As Alicia walked, she thought to herself that places like this were all the same, loud drunkards and gossip. The topic of conversation at the time was whether the rumors were true that the king had died. One person mentioned hearing that the effort to subdue the devil beast king had failed, and they had all been killed. Someone else chimed in, saying they had failed so many times before, so what hope was there that things would change now? Apparently, not a single hero had managed to even reach the devil beast king. Another said no one was strong enough to challenge him. The title of hero was just for show. Most of them, he claimed, only became heroes for the treasures or swords granted by the king. He added that those so-called heroes had even sold the swords that were given to them. His companion agreed, saying he had heard the same thing. Even the king himself had apparently noticed it. Though he continued forging swords, no one had been worthy of them, so he stopped making them 15 years ago. The scene then shifted to show the late king of Haydn. Alicia overheard one of them wondering why the king had chosen 13 new heroes. The man also said he had heard they even paraded at the castle. His companion hadn't expected that. Alicia looked over when she heard them say that maybe those heroes thought they wouldn't fail to kill the devil beast king and wanted to show off. But in the end, they were still defeated. Because of that, they were calling the heroes failures. Alicia then walked straight to the counter to pick up their food. The gossip in the inn hadn't ended yet, and one person went as far as to blame the heroes for the king's death, the fall of the castle, and the Bullet Army's invasion of the country. Most of those listening agreed, saying it was the heroes who should be blamed, even calling them fools. They said it was because the heroes wanted to reach the outside of Edthea or something, and because they didn't have their feet on the ground and were disconnected from reality. That's why everything had turned into such a mess. Instead of having a decent job like the rest of them, they had become daydreaming idiots. Alicia didn't react to what she heard. Though she hadn't expected the criticism toward heroes to be this harsh, she couldn't deny that, to some extent, they were telling the truth. That's how people saw heroes now. She climbed the stairs to their room, carrying the food she and Nella would eat. But suddenly, she was startled by the sound of a glass window shattering above. It was as if some strange object had been thrown into the inn. Alicia was puzzled when she saw it and wondered if it was a devil beast, but it didn't seem like one. Pete was just as surprised when the object landed in front of him. Gari screamed and demanded to know who had broken their window. Pete approached the fallen object, wondering aloud if it was a rock. But Alicia suddenly shouted, warning him not to touch it. Pete, however, couldn't resist his curiosity. Moments later, the small ball transformed into an enormous centipede, which lunged at them, knocking Pete back with great force. Its terrifying size reached all the way to the ceiling of the inn. Alicia, stunned by what she saw, couldn't help but drop the food she was carrying. Meanwhile, panic swept through the others in the inn, and someone questioned whether it was really an insect. Phil rushed over to his brother lying on the floor and helped him up. Maynard appeared at the doorway of the inn and declared that it wasn't just any ordinary insect. That creature, he said, lived in the same kind of habitat as devil beasts, an insect on par with devil beasts in power. In other words, it was an amazing insect. He advised everyone inside not to make any sudden movements. One wrong move, and the creature would attack them on its own, even without being ordered. After all, it was still an insect. Alicia hadn't expected to see a wizard who used insects. She was about to reach for her sword, but then realized she had left it back in the room. One of the people inside panicked and bolted. His companion called out to him, calling him Gabby. Gabby shouted that he was leaving and need to run away. He said he couldn't stand creatures with so many legs. He leapt toward one of the windows to escape, ignoring the pleas to stop. Without fear, he crashed through the glass. But what he didn't expect was that one of the insects had been waiting outside. In fact, many were already swarming the area, and one of them caught him midair. Moments later, the creature tore his body apart. Maynard remarked that he had forgotten to mention there were more of those insects outside. And by the way, he added, the entire town was already surrounded by them. He had ordered them not to let a single person escape. Several of the creatures were now making their way into the inn. One of the customers asked what those insects were. Maynard simply warned that if they didn't want to die, they shouldn't even think about trying to flee. Gary demanded to know who he was and what he wanted. Maynard bowed slightly and acknowledged that he had indeed been rude for not introducing himself earlier. He identified himself as Maynard Swan, the top wizard of the Bullet Army, under the command of General Dorell. Phil and Pete were stunned to hear that he was from Bullet. They hadn't expected them to reach their town so quickly. Alicia was immediately on alert upon hearing that he was an officer from Dorell's forces. Maynard went on to say that his objective was simple, to check whether the infant from Haydn had royal blood or not. Alicia grew nervous the moment she heard that. Just then, a scream came from their room. Alicia was startled and wondered if that had been Nellie. Inside the room, Nellie had been pinned down by the iron bed. The one responsible was a wizard. She said it's going to be a pain, so she would explain everything first. She introduced herself as Onii-Chan, a high wizard from the Bullet Army as well. Nellie asked if she was really part of the army, to which the woman replied yes, saying she was a fairly powerful wizard. Nellie was curious how she had even gotten there, considering they were on the second floor. The woman explained that she had flown using the axe she was holding. She had the ability to control magnetism, able to attract or repel anything made of iron. To demonstrate, she lifted the axe and, holding its wooden handle, pushed the iron head away from her. As a result, it floated upward until it reached the ceiling. With that, she said she could fly. She then let go of the axe and stepped down to approach the child. She shared that in the east, there was a turtle with an iron shell, and its magical power was used as a base. At least, that's what she had heard. Even if someone tried to slash it with a sword, the blade would only stick to it. And if attacked with a stone spear, the iron shell would simply block it. It seems to be quite a pain. She admitted it was kind of lame that it was from a turtle, but each person had their own unique aptitude. She then used her magic to produce a small glowing orb and moved it toward baby Luna. Nellie asked what it was and what she planned to do. The woman responded that it was just a drug meant to assess the child's abilities. Slowly approaching, she said that since Luna was still so small, she would crush the orb first before feeding it to him. If Luna had potential in dark arts, then the color of his eyes would change. But if he didn't, the child would choke on his own blood and die. Nellie was horrified upon hearing the possibility that Luna could die, but Nay calmly added that it would be fine, he wouldn't suffer. And if he didn't die, then it would confirm he was related to the king. Nellie pleaded with her to stop, struggling desperately, and saying she couldn't allow the child's life to be put at risk. Nay responded that it was pointless to resist. With her iron manipulation, she could stop even a charging bull. And with 2 iron beds pinning her down, it would take strength beyond that of 2 bulls to escape. Judging by the look of Nellie's slender arms, she didn't think she had it in her. Once again, Nellie ordered her to get away from Luna, but Nay ignored her, intent on feeding the drug to the child. Nello repeated her plea for her to stay away, and shockingly, she managed to push off the iron bed, pinning her to the ceiling. She hurled it back toward Nei, catching the high wizard completely off guard. The force of the throw was so great that the bed went flying out the window and was destroyed on impact. The noise startled Alicia, who immediately wondered what was happening. She quickly ran to check on Luna and Nello, shouting that she was on her way as she rushed up the stairs to the second floor. Maynard, clearly amused, sent the giant centipede to attack her mid-run. He told her not to act on her own so carelessly. The massive creature blocked Alicia's path, preventing her from reaching the child. Gary shouted out, calling "Dear customer" and trying to get his attention. But Maynard only smiled, intrigued by Alicia, a swordsman carrying a baby from Haydn. He didn't know who she was, but they didn't care about the details since it wasn't their business. They simply told her they'd take the baby off her hands. However, what surprised him was that Alicia was not even scratched. She stood calmly in front of the centipede. Instead of dodging, she faced it head-on and caught it. She stopped it by grabbing its antennae and stepping on its head. Declaring that she wouldn't be killed so easily, she stunned Maynard with her display of strength. Alicia then twisted the centipede's antennae and made a break for it. Because of her actions, the creature could no longer attack. Watching this unfold, Maynard realized that she wasn't just some ordinary swordsman. Then something caught his eye. Something about her seemed familiar. Alicia ran quickly to check on Nello in the room, and when she opened the door, she saw someone collapsed on the floor while Nello was facing a gaping hole in the wall. She was carrying baby Luna, and both of them were crying. Meanwhile, Nei lay unconscious on the ground. Alicia approached and asked if she and Luna were okay. Nello insisted that yes, they were safe. Good, Alicia replied. Alicia then asked if the wizard was the one who made the hole in the wall. Nello explained that she had only tried to push the beds, and when she came back to her senses, the room was already in that state. Alicia couldn't understand why she would push the beds, but didn't dwell on it too much. What mattered now was that they had to leave the place. Luna was clearly their target, and they had to protect him until Clen returned. When Nello asked what they would do about their luggage, Alicia answered that they were leaving it behind. All she needed was her sword, which she retrieved immediately. Nello grew worried upon noticing the flying insects outside and pointed them out to Alicia, but Alicia already knew. She said it was fine, she would cut through them. All Nello had to do was trust her and jump. With no other option, Nello obeyed, leaping out while carrying Luna, with Alicia right behind her. Alicia then used her secret technique, consecutive attacks, Dragonfly. As soon as she unsheathed her sword, she slashed through the flying insects surrounding them. They landed safely, and Alicia ordered her to run. More insects followed, and just then, Nei regained consciousness and saw them escaping. She forced herself to stand and threw her axe, determined not to let them get away. She targeted them by spinning her axe in the air like a boomerang. However, Alicia noticed it. She pointed to a direction and told Nello they were turning there, allowing them to dodge the attack. The only thing Nei's axe hit was a tree, which it cleanly sliced through. Nei was frustrated that they had managed to escape. She couldn't chase after them either, not with the insects in the way. Maynard would have to lift the encirclement for that to happen. Still, she couldn't believe the strength Nello had shown when she threw and pushed the iron beds. She stared at one of the iron beds, which had even flown onto the roof of a nearby building. Meanwhile, as Alicia and Nello fled, Alicia noticed that the insects weren't able to pursue them very far. It seemed they had only been ordered to surround the inn. With that in mind, they continued their escape, hoping they could get out of town without further trouble. They kept running straight ahead, but suddenly, a wall of insects greeted them. Of course, it wasn't going to be that easy. Alicia grew concerned. She couldn't keep using her dragonfly attack continuously. And besides, there were just too many insects in front of them. Nello asked what they should do now. Alicia firmly replied that for now, they needed to hide. Their top priority was Luna's safety. They had to find a place where those insects couldn't get in. With that decision made, the two ran off again to search for a place to hide. Back at the inn, Nei had come downstairs to meet with Maynard. She apologized and admitted that the targets had escaped. When he asked if she had managed to test the baby, she replied that she hadn't. She was stopped by a woman with superhuman strength. Maynard remarked that they had clearly underestimated the two of them. He was certain that the swordsman with the eye patch was a hero. He identified her as Alicia Glenfall, one of the 13 heroes. Ney was shocked upon hearing this. Maynard added that he had also been there when General Dorell fought her father, and he was absolutely sure about her identity. The people who had been trapped in the inn overheard the conversation. Pete and Phil could hardly believe what they were hearing, that Alicia was a hero. Maynard went on to say that there was no need to test the infant anymore. The fact that a hero was protecting him meant he was undoubtedly someone special. They had found him. Even though Maynard didn't know the full details, he admitted he was thrilled. Things were starting to get exciting. And he said she was worthy of being bullied. He laughed heartily at his own comment. And now, he ordered everyone to gather in the town square, all of the town's residents. The townspeople were confused as to why they were being summoned to the square. Even Gari couldn't protest. With no other choice, the people began heading to the square, completely surrounded by swarms of insects. Standing in front of them were the wizards Maynard and Ney. One of the citizens asked what exactly they were planning. He couldn't believe the bullet soldiers had gathered them all using insects. And from what he could see, there were only 4 of them. Meanwhile, everyone in town was armed. Even if they weren't, it would be crazy for Maynard's group to think they could intimidate an entire town with just a handful of insects. The man said he had no problem starting a fight right here and now, but he first wanted to hear what they were planning to do with their country. Maynard smiled at what the man had said and exclaimed, "Wonderful." He said the residents of Shiron were truly reliable. But first, he said, there was something he wanted to make clear. If their king hadn't died due to his own recklessness, they wouldn't have come here in the first place. They might think that the Bullet army had come to invade their land, but that, he claimed, wasn't the truth. A resident asked how that possibly wasn't the truth. Maynard explained that they had come to protect them, their land, and the place where they lived. A devil beast king had attacked their capital, he said, and if it continued its rampage, that place would surely become territory ruled by devil beasts. The already small world of humans would shrink even more, and he knew no one wanted that. It was clear, he said, that Haydn had no power left to prevent that outcome. That was why they had come, to protect the world of humans with their power. They hadn't come to take anything away from them. If that were true, Phil asked, then what were all those insects for? And more importantly, one of them had already been killed. How did he plan to explain that? Maynard admitted that it was true. Someone had died from one of the insects. But he claimed it had been an unfortunate accident. Phil couldn't accept that and was furious that Maynard would call it an accident. Maynard insisted that they had come to apprehend a vicious criminal, a traitor to the people of Haydn and an enemy of all hominids. The insects, he said, were necessary to capture that person. That's why what had happened was merely a byproduct of that mission, an accident. Phil grew more enraged at this explanation. Another person asked who exactly this vicious criminal was. Someone else questioned Maynard's earlier words that it wasn't just his enemy. Maynard clarified that yes, this person was their enemy too. After all, she was the cause of everything. One of the 13 heroes. Everyone was shocked when Maynard declared that the person he was referring to was Alicia Glenfall. He called on all of them to join forces in hunting down that hero. Meanwhile, Alicia and Nellel continued running, though both were clearly out of breath and growing exhausted. Alicia seemed to notice something, prompting Nellel to ask what was wrong. Alicia replied that it was nothing, then pointed out the path they would take. They were now deep within the forest. Back in town, Maynard had successfully roused the residents of Shiron to join him in the search for Alicia. Each one held torches and weapons as they prepared to hunt her down. The scene then shifted to a shallow river, where the army led by General Dorell had arrived. After successfully breaching Haydn's second fort, the group continued pressing forward, with Dorell leading at the front. He noticed something nearby and called out, telling whoever was hiding not to bother concealing themselves. The moon was especially bright that night, he said, so they might as well come out. And if they didn't, his army would come to them. Suddenly, someone burst out of the forest with incredible speed. It was Rod, armed and ready. He wielded the treasure weapon known as Snowflower and stepped forward to face General Dorell. Dorell looked surprised to see him. Rod then drove his weapon into the river, instantly freezing it. This allowed his group to dash forward and join him. Rod firmly declared that they would stop them right there. Rod's allied troops began following him in the front lines, and Mikkel shouted for all of their soldiers to charge as well. She commanded them to go after the division commander and told them not to waste this opportunity. While they were running, Dorel noticed that Rod had spikes on the soles of his feet, to which Rod replied that's exactly what it is. He explained that on this frozen river, troops would fall, and neither horses nor their sluggish grands would be able to stand upright. When Dorel's troops attempted to charge, Rod's plan unfolded exactly as intended. They slipped and lost their balance, causing many of them to fall to the ground. Even their massive mounts couldn't stay standing on the icy ground and eventually collapsed, crushing large numbers of their own troops beneath them. While holding formation, Rod told the enemy general that to fill the numeric gap of 50,000 versus 6,000, this plan alone was enough. Dorel simply stared at him with no emotion. Meanwhile, Mikkel continued giving instructions to their troops, shouting that they should bring down as many enemies as they could while they still had the advantage, and that they should target the wizards first. She told them not to let any of the fallen enemies get back on their feet. Their troops followed her orders and ruthlessly executed the downed enemies on the battlefield. Their battle cries echoed as they moved from one immobilized opponent to the next, mercilessly finishing them off, prompting Dorel to turn toward his troops, though he still wasn't disturbed by the sight. He praised Rod for pulling it off and called him a descendant of a hero, Royce. He then explained that years ago, someone said that a herd of devil beasts charging toward a city within Estlin was repelled by a treasure called Snowflower. However, even if it was a treasure with the power of freezing, it shouldn't have been possible to freeze the entire river they were standing on with a single strike. Because of that, he asked if it was true that Rod had sent wizards upstream to cool the river until it was on the verge of freezing. Rod suddenly charged at Dorel while answering that it was exactly as he said. Now, he just needed to stop Dorel, and victory would be theirs. Dorel asked him if he really thought he could do that, and Rod answered that he would show him. Once Rod got within striking range, he swung his spear upward to hit Dorel on horseback. To counter the attack, Dorel unsheathed his own special weapon, which immediately emitted an aura. With a single swing, he easily blocked Rod's charge and forced him to retreat. Due to the force of the impact, Rod had to stab his snow flower into the ground to anchor himself and prevent getting blown too far back, and visible on his face was the struggle to hold on. This display seemed to capture Dorel's interest, seeing that Rod managed to withstand his strike. Rod readied himself to attack again and, while aiming the blade of his spear at the general, declared that it should be obvious he could endure that. After taking that stance, Rod unleashed an attack he called Ice Ba, which summoned the head of a serpent made of snow, flying toward Dorel. It devoured the ground beneath Dorel and the horse he was riding, and the general's face showed shock as it happened. In a blink, the snow serpent surrounded the horse and instantly froze it solid, while Rod sarcastically asked if Dorel would mind getting off his horse. To avoid being taken down with it, Dorel quickly leapt off his mount, and the moment he landed, Rod followed up with a swift swing. However, Dorel still managed to block it and even praised Rod's spear handling. As their weapons continued clashing, he added that Rod also had the ability to draw out the treasure's power and said his strategy was flawless. But then, he said it was useless, which made Rod respond with an irritated tone, questioning what he meant. As Dorel pushed his spear forward, he said it was because Rod wouldn't be able to reach him. While raising his special sword, it began to emit an even stronger aura, and he explained that to break through the limits of their world, Rod's current abilities were still far from enough. Not long after, a massive bone claw emerged from the sword's aura, which shocked Rod. Dorel's eyes also changed appearance after releasing it, and right after that, he shouted the name of the move, Dead Dragon's Claw, as he launched it at Rod. Rod tried to block it, but due to the attack's overwhelming power, he lost his footing and was thrown back. Mikkel shouted his name in alarm when she saw it, as Rod was sent flying far. The attack left claw marks across the ground, and Rod tumbled across the battlefield, making Mikkel even more worried for him. Dorel then explained that by fusing dark arts into his treasure weapon, the Black Dragon, he had reached beyond the realm of the sword. Right after that, Dorel didn't hold back and released another Dead Dragon's Claw, sweeping it across the field in front of him. Countless of Rod's troops were sent flying by that attack, and even Mikhail was caught up in the power of it. In Rod's situation, he struggled to lift himself up while visibly worried about his comrades. As he watched, Doral pointed out to him that those weak enough to fall in this battle had no right to step into the world that is to come. Rod questioned that statement about a coming world and said Doral had just been rambling about limits earlier, then asked what exactly he was trying to do. Doral turned to him and answered seriously, the destruction of the hero's legend. He said there was no point in carrying on a legend that could never be realized, and that because of the half-hearted legend of the heroes, everyone kept trying to challenge enemies they couldn't defeat, using methods that could never win with. Just like Rod's grandfather and his old friend. He said those two fought by putting their faith in the legend, and they lost. He went on to explain that for thousands of years, even 10,000 years, it was the same thing repeating endlessly. He questioned why the legend never changed over time and declared that it has to be put to an end. While Rod struggled to get up, Doral began walking away, saying that he wouldn't kill the young general of Eslan out of respect after seeing how well he fought. Then, he said they would move forward and told Rod to stay there and witness the changing of the world. Because of the severe beating he took, even as Rod tried to stand and stop Doral, he couldn't do it anymore and collapsed to the ground. However, just as Doral was about to resume his movement toward Hydrat, Clevatess suddenly landed right in front of him, causing a powerful impact that sent everyone nearby flying. Clevatess stood with a swagger and flared his aura as he entered the scene, locking eyes with Doral. Doral called him by name, while the others around them could only stare and gape in fear and shock at the arrival of the Devil Beast King. As they stood face to face, Clevatess commented that this must be Doral. Clevatess then unleashed a terrifying howl, releasing a tremendous aura, something Doral clearly felt, while Mikhail, from the side, shuddered at the fact that this Devil Beast King could speak. Rod also commented that even the voice alone carried an overwhelming pressure, which left him in awe of the Devil Beast King of the South. Doral immediately grabbed and unsheathed his black dragon, stating that Clevatess was right. He was indeed Doral. He asked the Devil Beast why he was here, addressing him by his full title, to which Clevatess responded that he simply wanted to ask one thing, and that's how Doral obtained the power he's holding now, the one they call Dark Arts. He also pointed out that offspring of hominids and devil beasts have been mysteriously disappearing in the south, and asked if it was true that this was related to the dark arts Doral was using. Doral responded with skepticism, asking if the Devil Beast King had really come all this way just to ask that kind of question. To that, Clevatess responded that when his territory is attacked, it becomes the duty of a king to deliver justice for it. He added that just like the king of that nation, any beings who would defile his land would be wiped out by his own claws. That, he said, was the natural order of things, the law of this world. Doral laughed after hearing that and questioned what Clevatess had said. He asked under whose authority that law was decided. Was it God who made that so? Right after, Clevatess began moving his tails, and because of that, he effortlessly sent waves of enemies flying. Mikhail was once again blown away by the sheer force of the wind he released, while Rod struggled to keep himself from being thrown off his feet. As a counter, Doral tried to cast his dead dragon's claw, but before he could finish, Clevatess suddenly pierced him through the body, catching him off guard. While lifting him up, Clevatess warned him not to answer a question with another, calling him a fool. Doral coughed violently from the impalement, while Clevatess simply stared at him. Despite his wound, Doral managed to let out a laugh and commented that he was right, which made Clevatess puzzled. As what appeared to be a third eye opened on Doral's forehead, he explained to Clevatess that after he took down Haydn's castle, he had already expected him to appear again. The third eye fully opened, and it began to emit the same aura as his black dragon. With intense fury on his face, Doral declared that this was a dark arts technique developed for the sole purpose of sealing the Devil Beast King, Clevatess. After that, Doral shouted Clevatess's name and declared that they were about to see if he could withstand his ultimate secret dark art. He called this move Devil Blood Prison, as a sinister aura emerged from his head, which caught Clevatess's attention and made him ask what he had just said again. Doral's nose began bleeding heavily while he smiled, and right after, his entire body suddenly exploded into blood, shocking Clevatess. Doral's blood spun in the air while his black dragon dropped to the ground. When Clevatess realized what kind of move Doral had just performed, it visibly surprised him. Soon after, a massive sphere of blood formed around him. The surroundings fell silent in the wake of what had just occurred. Rod was also shocked to see the Devil Beast King being enveloped in that sphere of blood. Back at Doral's black dragon sword, the blade suddenly spoke the word "opens," and an eye opened on it. It began emitting a sinister aura, and from it, Doral emerged once more, his third eye now wide open. Rod was visibly shaken at the sight, his face showing deep distress, while Doral quickly explained to him that he had now discarded his body. He said that he had now become a sword, and that the sword itself was now his life, showing his black dragon as he said this. He then added that using this blood prison, made from his own flesh and blood, even a Devil Beast King would have a hard time escaping it. Inside the blood sphere, Clevatess was briefly shown curled up on himself like an unborn hatchling, motionless and silent. Afterward, Doral sheathed his sword and began walking away from the sphere, stating that now, Clevatess would slowly die inside it. He walked past Rod, who was still frozen in disbelief, unable to fathom that the Devil Beast King had actually been defeated, while Doral glanced at him with a proud, smug expression, clearly reveling in his victory against such a powerful opponent. Then, as the floating blood sphere began to emit a circular gust in the air, he shouted to all of his troops to continue their charge. While that was happening, the scene shifted back to Shiron village. The villagers were storming the area where Alicia was hiding inside a watermill, carrying fire torches and axes. Phil shouted that they knew Alicia was inside the watermill, while calling her hero. He said they had played in these woods since childhood, and hiding was useless. She should just come out and face them. Inside the watermill, Alicia and Nello were shown together as Phil continued, saying that Alicia and the other heroes got carried away just because they had a bit of skill with a sword. Worry was clearly written on Alicia's face as she thought about what to do in this situation, while Phil added that the reason everything was a mess now was because they tried to challenge the Devil Beast King, then angrily shouted at her, asking if she was even listening. Phil went on to say that he had hated them even from before. According to him, they were arrogant and didn't deserve to be called heroes just for occasionally killing a few devil beasts. What had they even accomplished with those swords? Swords paid for by the taxes the people gave. He sarcastically asked if they used those swords for woodworking or cutting down trees just to build themselves homes and furniture. This man kept ranting, insisting that in truth, there was nothing remarkable about being a hero. After that, Phil asked the others with him if he was right, and they all voiced their agreement with what he said. Nello and Alicia stared at the window upon hearing all of this, and not long after, Nello couldn't hold back and shouted back at the man, saying that she thought Miss Alicia was a wonderful person. She pointed out that Alicia had saved her, where Alicia told her to get away from the window. Nello tried to protest, but Alicia explained that her safety and Luna's was the top priority here. She added that since they couldn't leave the town, she had already known it would come to this, but she didn't expect the villagers to find them so quickly. She also said that it didn't seem like the insect users were there yet, but even if they forced their way out, without another place to hide, it would be pointless. She began biting her nails as she thought about what they could possibly do. Phil caught their attention when he shouted again, saying they wouldn't wait any longer. If they didn't come out, the fire would surely do it for them. The man prepared to throw his torch at them, which alarmed Alicia and Nello. However, just as Phil was about to throw the torch, a hand stopped him. It turned out to be his brother, Pete, which surprised him as he asked why he was being stopped. Pete just stared at him and gestured for him to look to the side, and when Phil turned, he was shocked to see their mother and father walking towards there. His father ordered him to stop what he was doing and explained that the watermill was built by their ancestors more than 200 years ago, so he absolutely could not burn it down. Phil tried to argue, saying, "But weren't they supposed to hand over Alicia to Maynard?" Because of that, his father smacked him on the head and asked why he was following orders from a stranger. He pointed out that this was their city and their country. It was their problem to deal with. His father explained that he was making those people wait on the edge of town to monitor them, and said they weren't going to let them do whatever they pleased. So, he added, Phil should go back there and leave this to their father. That caught Alicia's attention, and as the man approached the watermill, he shouted his name, Mark, and introduced himself as the leader of the vigilantes. He told them to come out, that he had something he wanted to ask them. He promised that they wouldn't lay a hand on Nello or Luna while they talked. He only wanted to speak to Alicia, so she should come out. Nello and Alicia began to consider what they should do, while from outside, Phil asked what it was that their father wanted to ask, to which Pete replied that he didn't know, and their mother hushed them both, telling them to just watch. Before long, Alicia made her decision and instructed Nello to stay inside. She stepped out and faced Mark. Mark remarked that so she was the hero, to which Alicia responded that yes, she was. He then asked what happened to her treasure. Alicia replied that unfortunately, she lost it. Mark was skeptical and said he hoped she didn't just sell it, to which Alicia replied that no, she dropped it during her battle with Clevatess. Upon hearing that, Mark commented that so it was true that they had challenged the Devil Beast King and lost. Alicia agreed and said they were thoroughly defeated. She added that it was only natural that people would hate her for it, so she was asking for their forgiveness. Just as she was about to continue explaining, Mark said he understood now, and if that was the case, then there was no problem. Alicia was confused and asked what he meant. Mark explained that if she had tried to use the treasure for something else, he would have killed her. But if she simply challenged Clevatess and lost, he had no complaints. He said the one who sent the heroes to fight was the king, and pointed out that it was all part of tradition, while Phil asked if it was really okay to just accept that. Alicia was surprised and asked if Mark didn't resent her, to which he replied that they weren't the problem. The real question, he said, was whether they should still cling to that tradition, and he asked if it was really worth continuing, after all the sacrifices that had been made. He added that now that when the new king is appointed, they, the people, would decide whether or not to support that king. Mark then explained that in 1,000 years, the only heroes who had ever reached the Devil Beast King were them, and asked if they had seen what was behind the Moon Mountain or beyond the end of their world. He asked what it was like and whether it was worth it. Alicia then recalled the sight she had seen while fighting Clevatess. After she had chipped his horn, he sent her flying and severed her left arm and legs. While she was airborne from that attack, she saw something in the distance. She explained to Mark that at the moment that happened to her, in that instant, she really did see it. She said that what she saw there was round, the world was endless, and it was a round horizon going endlessly. She repeated Mark's question about whether it was worth it, to which she answered that obviously, yes, it was. She admitted that maybe she did fail, but what she could say was, if all you've ever known since the beginning was a cramped world, there would be many things you wouldn't understand, and some things you could never obtain without building up the courage to take a step forward. She added that encounters are like that, too, and explained that the one who recently made her realize all of that was arrogant and terrifying, and worked her like a rag. She pointed out that if they hadn't met, surely her world would still be narrow. Right after that, she shouted, asking if they understood. She pointed out to them that there's meaning in broadening their world by going beyond that mountain range and past their own limits. She added that she would never let anyone say that the heroes who fought and fell in the past died for nothing, something that visibly stunned both Phil and Pete. After hearing all of that, Mark remarked that at the very least, the late king chose the right person for that, then said they could leave now, surprising Alicia. He added that they should just let an old man like him explain things to the young ones. He also said that for the next king as well, she had to do her best, something that shocked Alicia and made her question how Mark knew about Luna, while Mark's two sons were left confused by their father's words, and Nello simply continued watching silently. Mark then said that they would take care of the soldiers, while they leave the wall of insects to Alicia and the others. However, to their surprise, Maynard suddenly appeared on the scene, riding his gigantic centipede, and using the fangs of that insect, he slashed across Mark's chest, creating a deep rupture and causing him to scream in agony. After doing that, Maynard asked what exactly they were trying to do without his permission. Mark's family was stunned, shouting in panic, while Alicia immediately prepared to fight and shouted at Maynard, calling him a bastard and demanding how dare he do that. But Maynard showed no remorse for what he had done to Mark and simply said that they ruined all the fun here. So of course he was angry, which made Alicia question what kind of fun he was even talking about. Maynard replied that what he meant was the scene of a hero revered by the people of Haydn, being hunted down and judged by those very same people of Haydn. Alicia clicked her tongue in annoyance and swiftly readied her sword. After building momentum, she unleashed her technique called Rising Dragon on Maynard's giant centipede, circling it upward like a spiraling upward strike. Maynard leapt away to avoid getting hit and laughed, commenting that she was overly eager. Meanwhile, Alicia quickly shouted to the people there to hide inside the watermill while they still could, because the insects were coming. Mark's family, along with the other villagers, started to panic, and after Maynard flashed a grin at them, swarms of insects began arriving in overwhelming numbers, ready to storm them. From inside the watermill, Nello screamed Alicia's name out of deep worry, while the villagers outside moved fast to enter, with the two brothers carrying their wounded father as they did so. Fortunately, they made it safely inside the watermill just before the insects got to them. They quickly shut the doors to prevent the swarm from entering, but due to their sheer number, the insects began to surround the area. On Alicia's side, she began slicing through several of the insects using her move called Dragonfly. As she landed on the ground afterward, Maynard sarcastically expressed amazement, saying she was strong, as expected of a hero. He followed up that she really was quite something for eliminating that many insects. He remarked that she had an incredible spirit of self-sacrifice, fighting all alone like that, and said it was truly impressive. However, he then questioned whether she could really protect them that way. At that moment, Alicia suddenly felt a heavy sensation overwhelm her body, to which Maynard pointed out that he forgot to mention, some of the insects could poison. He said that if she focused only on the large insects, she would get killed by the venom of the small ones. The flying wasps, the crawling ants, the caterpillars clinging to the leaves of trees. Among them, the most terrifying were the venomous spiders that poison the blood. As Maynard said this, one of the spiders reached Alicia's nape and immediately bit down, causing her to react and smack the spot. She managed to crush it, but she began trembling from the venom and grew anxious about Maynard's words about blood poisoning. Maynard added that the potent venom in those creatures could melt a small animal from the inside. He then remarked that he had always hated heroes like Alicia, though it would be more accurate to say he really adored them and then came to hate them. As he recalled a tragedy from his past, where it seems like he lost someone dear to him during a devil-beast attack in their area, Maynard told Alicia that none of them were there when he needed them the most. When he lost everything, it was the neighborhood couple that proved more reliable. He began getting serious and added that those heroes were nothing more than flashy decorations. He then unleashed his swarm of insects toward Alicia, screaming that they couldn't protect a single thing, and that the only one capable of protecting people like him, who had lost all faith in heroes, was General Doral. Despite her current state, Alicia forced herself to keep cutting down the approaching insects, and as she did, she began to wonder if that venom would also work on devil blood. If so, she thought, that would be really bad. Suddenly, Clevatess grabbed her attention as she continued fighting off the countless insects, and she was shocked when his face emerged from her chest. He told her to hurry up with clearing the mess she was dealing with, because there was something he needed her to do. Then, Maynard taunted Alicia mockingly, saying that she doesn't look well, as she continued resisting the swarm of insects unleashed by Maynard. He continued by asking if the poison has already spread throughout her body that made her unable to stand upright. Nello, Phil, and Pete were all filled with worry as they watched from the window inside the water mill, witnessing the intense struggle Alicia was going through in the fight. Gari then told her two children and the townsfolk with them to fill the gaps inside the cabin and crush any insects that got in. It was because they couldn't allow Bullet to get the baby and its nurse, as she knew that this baby was the future of their nation. Then, Gari shouted loudly that they had to believe in Alicia and trust that somehow she would defeat the legion of insects outside, while they had to do their part and protect Luna and Nello as best as they could. The townsfolk were hyped up by her words and quickly picked up the tools they needed for the task. Outside, Maynard summoned even more swarms of insects and continued taunting Alicia relentlessly. He asked her if she truly believed she could liberate the world with such a pitiful amount of power. The taunting added to Alicia's stress. Maynard followed it up with further insults, saying that they, the heroes, were nothing but imitations, as he summoned a giant scorpion from beneath the ground. Alicia was utterly shocked when she suddenly had to face a massive scorpion, while Maynard laughed maniacally at his bullying. The scorpion quickly launched a tail strike at Alicia, and even though it didn't hit her directly, the force sent her flying backward. She was hurled into the forest lake and began to sink and drown due to the heaviness she felt in her body. Then, from within her chest, Clevatess suddenly reappeared. The two of them spoke telepathically, and Alicia confirmed to Clevatess that the poison had already affected her body, which was why her movements had become sluggish. Her body still felt heavy, and her wounds weren't healing, so she asked Clevatess if the poison worked on devil blood as well. Clevatess explained that the poison did affect devil blood even if it couldn't destroy it outright. As long as the poison remained strong in Alicia's body, the devil blood couldn't begin repairing her. Alicia now understood that she wasn't immortal in this battle, and Clevatess confirmed it. Arrogantly, Maynard asked Alicia if she didn't plan to rise up from the lake and whether she thought she'd be safe underwater. Then he said he didn't care if Alicia never resurfaced, because he had something else nasty in mind. Meanwhile, from inside the watermill, Phil heard insect sounds coming from the cabin's roof. Then, he was startled when a large larva suddenly fell from above. When the people looked up at the roof, they saw a circular hole. That's where the large larva had entered. Phil continued stomping on the larva in disgust. Then, when Pete peeked through the window, he saw more larvae joining the first one, and they were slowly eating away at the roof and columns. And this wasn't only happening there. Throughout the entire forest, an enormous number of larvae were devouring every single tree. Back in the town center of Shiron, we see Nay and the townsfolk surrounding two armored soldiers who had collapsed on the ground. The townsfolk noticed a commotion near the watermill, the same direction Maynard, whom they referred to as the bug guy, had gone. They could also hear the sounds coming from the forest, though they didn't yet know that the trees were being eaten by larvae. Because of this, Nay knew that Maynard's plan had already begun. The townsfolk overheard her say it started and asked her what she meant. One of them wondered aloud why the two armored clads hadn't followed Maynard. Another townsfolk told Nay that if the armored clads had gone with him, they wouldn't have ended up like this. But Nay snapped at the speaker and asked if he was stupid, because it was obvious the reason they didn't go was that they didn't want to die. According to Nay, once Maynard got serious, he wouldn't stop until everything around him was reduced to ash. Maynard could control all manner of insects. He was the strongest and most terrible sorcerer of the Bullet Army. Let's return to the battle between Alicia and Maynard, where Maynard asked Alicia if she could still hear the sound of larvae eating wood from beneath the water and the screams of the forest. These larvae came from the giant moth Oniii-Chan, according to Maynard. Once every 100 years, they hatch from their eggs and devour everything in their area. They're endemic to a certain island on the east side. The cycle on that island repeats every 100 years, alternating between being completely barren and overvegetated. These larvae are skillful and instinctively avoid eating the seeds that will eventually regrow into a massive forest, the same kind of forest where they'll later lay their eggs. Using his magic from the crystal in his chest, Maynard could force that cycle to accelerate. And in just a short moment, the entire watermill would disappear due to the larvae's overwhelming appetite. Then, he asked Alicia what she thought would happen to all the people inside the watermill once they had nowhere left to hide. Maynard mentioned Shiron's main industry and asked Alicia if the disappearance of the entire forest wouldn't be a massive problem for them. Alicia was enraged by everything Maynard was saying. Driven by emotion, she leapt powerfully out of the water and up into the air to charge at Maynard. But she was stunned and distracted when she saw that the forest was now filled with an overwhelming number of cocoons. Maynard then said the next cycle was about to begin. One cocoon quickly hatched, and out came a fully developed giant moth Oniii-Chan. But it wasn't alone. Soon, one after another, its siblings burst forth from all the cocoons scattered throughout the forest. Alicia couldn't believe what she was seeing, and while she was still airborne, the giant moths all rushed her at once. Maynard declared that these creatures multiplied quickly and that if Alicia was brave enough, she was welcome to try stopping them. But, sounding like a madman, Maynard also said they were absolutely impossible to stop. Still, Alicia had no choice but to fight and push forward. After only 2 powerful slashes, her face was splattered with scales from the moths she had killed. Blinded by the scales, she didn't see the incoming massive claw smash from the giant scorpion and was severely injured when it struck her. Maynard insulted her again, saying that in the end, she was nothing more than one of the imitations. Alicia could do nothing but rage silently and take all the abuse Maynard hurled at her. Then, the giant moths attacked her from behind, piercing her with a barrage of giant needle thrusts in the back. Alicia could only scream in pain from the overwhelming agony. Maynard then insulted her again, saying she couldn't protect even a single thing or a single person. As Alicia collapsed to the ground, she was immediately swarmed by poisonous spiders and bugs. All sorts of insects rushed her, biting and attacking relentlessly. Nellel, watching through the window, was deeply worried for her. But there was nothing either of them could do. Alicia had been completely overwhelmed by the enemy and was now beginning to drown in an ocean of insects. And from the darkness within, Clevatess, who had grown tired of waiting inside Alicia, could only mutter in frustration, "Good grief." Suddenly, a sword appeared in the middle of the insect ocean, and Maynard was caught off guard when he saw it. He quickly recognized the sword as a sacred treasure and asked aloud where such a thing had come from and how it had been hidden from him. Apparently, the waterfall slicer had emerged from within Alicia's chest, and from there, Clevatess also emerged to offer her some advice. He said that all living creatures in the world were made of water, including insects. The swarm of insects Alicia was fighting was just a collection of water, and she should think of them as nothing more than a river. And the waterfall slicer had enough power to slice through that river. The two understood each other with just a glance. Then, Clevatess repeated what he had said to Alicia earlier. "Hurry up and clean this place up." So, Alicia immediately equipped the waterfall slicer, and what happened next shocked Maynard. In an instant, a massive explosion erupted at the center of the ocean of insects where Alicia had been drowning. The entire ocean of insects was wiped out in that single attack, and Alicia was freed. She then used her treasure's ultimate move and uttered the words, "Waterfall Slicer, Flowing Water Slash." It was a spinning attack that unleashed a powerful slicing force all around Alicia. Because its area of effect radiated outward, there was no escape for any insect caught in its path. With just one ultimate move, all the flying insects were obliterated one after another, and Maynard could do nothing but watch as his swarms died. Unexpectedly, the area of effect even reached his position and cleanly sliced in half the giant scorpion he was mounted on. He fell from it, screaming. From a bird's eye view, we see that the waterfall slicer's effect extended to the farthest reaches of the entire forest. Everyone in Shiron could see the light of this spectacle. No one could believe that Alicia had managed to wipe out all the swarms of insects throughout Shiron. And when Phil and Pete saw the rain of insect corpses, all their doubts disappeared. Alicia was truly a hero. Dead insects rained down across the entire area, and Alicia looked completely exhausted from the battle. Maynard was overwhelmed with disbelief at what had just happened. Then, he saw a crack form in the magic stone embedded in his chest. He was filled with fear as Alicia approached and pointed her sword at him from up close. But he still tried to act brave and said he would not surrender. Before he could say another word, Alicia smacked him on the head with the hilt of the waterfall slicer to knock him out. She simply said that she didn't have time to talk to him. Maynard now lay fast asleep on the ground, and Alicia, too, could no longer stay on her feet due to sheer exhaustion. Nellel ran as soon as she saw Alicia starting to collapse, but it didn't look like she would make it in time. Fortunately, Clint arrived just in time to catch Alicia's body, but instead of praising her, he expressed disappointment that Alicia had struggled so much against a small fry. Nellel was shocked to see that Clint had already returned. Clint explained that their circumstances had changed, so he came back immediately to summon them. Alicia asked him what those circumstances were. She also asked if Clint had already defeated Dorel, but instead of answering directly, Clint said that their changed circumstances were indeed about Dorel. Apparently, there was another demon beast king behind Dorel. As night fell, we see a Haidnite officer on horseback rushing along the road where many Haidnite soldiers were clearing rubble from the ruins of Hydrak Castle. The aftermath of Clevatess's attack on Haydn. The Haydn officer cried out, "Oh dear," realizing he was late and carrying urgent bad news, on top of seeing the dire condition of the Haydn capital. In the midst of the castle ruins, the returning Haydn army had already set up camp. Entering the largest royal tent, we find a female member of the royal family asking a Haidnite butler if they had found any survivors. The butler addressed the woman as Crown Princess Tawara Moranzita and replied that they had not. Princess Tawara then instructed him to continue focusing all their efforts on searching for survivors, because she knew her son, Hydelius VI, was still alive. Suddenly, an elderly woman, an old sage, approached Tawara and said she understood the princess's concern for her son. But according to the old sage, they were in a state of emergency due to the Bolid army closing in on Haydn, and their urgent matter should be relocating somewhere safer. With the king and his ministers gone, Princess Tawara was now the only one capable of uniting their nation. Tawara assured the old sage that she will not run away. She said that as the mother of her son, who was still alive and safe, she absolutely could not flee. The old sage then asked Tawara for permission to question how she knew her son was alive. Tawara revealed that she had witnessed it herself, deep inside the furnace that the king had sealed away. Earlier that night, accompanied by 2 royal guards, Tawara went straight to the entrance of the Haydn furnace upon her arrival at the Haydn capital. Carefully, she approached the sealed gate and peered inside to see the Haydn royal family furnace with her own eyes. What she saw was glowing red, which meant it was active. She explained to the old sage that whenever the king was absent, the furnace would remain dormant until the next king appeared. When it was active, it signified that there was still one person left in the world qualified to be king of Haydn. In other words, her son Hydelius VI, the last bearer of royal blood, was alive. Therefore, their priority now should be finding and protecting him, as he alone had the right to activate the furnace. She asked the old sage if she was wrong about what she had said. The old sage did not answer, so Tawara continued speaking. She said that as long as the furnace remained under the royal family, Haydn would remain Haydn. Thus, she would never leave Hydrak Castle without finding her son. But she also confessed to the old sage and the butler that truthfully, she had wanted to leave Haydn with her son before any of this happened. The old sage asked her what she meant by that. Tawara explained that she had felt a strong hunch, a premonition, that this would happen. According to her, their current heroes were not strong enough to defeat the Beast King. There was something Tawara regretted about on the day of the naming ceremony. She had failed to do what she should have because of the mounting duties she carried as princess that day. And as she said this, the Haidnite officer who had been rushing to return to the princess finally arrived outside her royal tent. Upon entering, the officer immediately bowed and announced his return, worry and anxiety written across his face. His name was Fabio Fripp, and Tawara immediately requested his report regarding his scouting mission. According to what Fabio saw, Dorel's 50,000 troops had engaged in battle against 6,000 rangers of Eslan at Morel River. The Eslan army had put up a good fight, but in the end they were still defeated by the overwhelming magical power of General Dorel. Tawara anxiously asked if Rod's division was among the defeated troops. Fabio confirmed it and said that wasn't even their real problem. Fabio recounted to Tawara that right after the battle ended, the Beast King Clevatess suddenly arrived on the battlefield and attacked Dorel's entire army. Tawara was shocked to hear this. Fabio continued, Clevatess instantly reduced Dorel's army to half its size. But what followed was troubling. Dorel created a mysterious sphere and engulfed Clevatess completely inside it. Now, Clevatess remained silent, imprisoned within the sphere. Tawara could not believe that Dorel had managed to silence a beast king of the 4 pillars like Clevatess. She asked Fabio if he was absolutely certain there was no mistake in his report. Fabio replied that there wasn't. He had confirmed everything with his own eyes. He was sure of what he saw, and it was truly Clevatess who was trapped inside Dorel's sphere. And according to what he last saw before rushing back, General Dorel was now heading toward them with 20,000 troops. Tawara was filled with worry at this grim news and couldn't believe that Dorel had actually defeated Clevatess. after 1,000 years without anyone ever defeating him in any battle. Worse, it wasn't even a hero who had done it. Tawara said that it was impossible and shouldn't happen, as it directly contradicted what they had believed according to their legend. But Fabio respectfully spoke up, saying that General Dorel was a former hero who possessed a sacred treasure, so he believed Dorel might be qualified to accomplish that feat. Before he could finish speaking, Tawara immediately raised her voice and told him he was wrong. Dorel could never be qualified. Leading an army against a country was not the act of a true hero. So, Tawara decided to act immediately and ordered Fabio to bring her armor. Fabio was taken aback by this. Then, Tawara declared that as a member of the royal family, it was her duty to shatter the sacred treasure Dorel wielded. Fabio was stunned to hear this, knowing that sacred treasures were believed to be unbreakable. But Tawara explained it was possible by using the one and only existing tool capable of both forging and breaking sacred treasures, the king's hammer. It was a one-handed hammer resembling Thor's Mjolnir. Fabio and the old sage were shocked by what Tawara intended to do. The old sage told her she must not use the king's hammer, as only the king was permitted to possess this royal treasure. But Tawara declared that until her son ascended the throne, she would stand as acting king. The subjects of the royal family followed the crown princess's orders, dressing her in her personal royal armor. Next, Fabio brought her the special box containing the king's hammer. Tawara thanked him for his hard work and equipped the king's hammer. She then raised it toward the flag bearing the royal family crest, showing that even the hammer itself was depicted in their emblem. She began praying to her ancestors for strength and sent Fabio to relay a message to all their military commanders to gather inside the city capital and prepare to confront Dorel's army. The next morning, we see the water mill in Shiron riddled with holes from the previous events, with dead insects scattered across the area. At this time, Phil threw down Nay while she's bound and restrained, hurting her in the process. Phil then loudly told Alicia that he had brought Nay for her, calling her brave sister. Alicia told him to stop calling her that, saying he clearly looked older than she was. Phil simply said Alicia was amazing. She had killed so many bugs with a single slash, and even though she'd been beaten to a pulp the night before, she was fine already this morning. Phil declared that he would serve as Alicia's errand boy while she was in their town. Because of that, Alicia asked him to fetch Nellel and Luna and also retrieve their luggage from the inn. Phil was overjoyed to follow Alicia's request, still calling her brave sister. Clen, amused for Alicia, jokingly remarked that she seemed to have her own servant now. Alicia didn't laugh and told Clen to stop making fun of her, admitting she was surprised by his sudden change in attitude. Clen then reminded her she was still covered in bug juice and looked like filth, so she should get changed. Alicia interjected, saying she wanted to get changed too. Then, Nay sat on the ground, feigning pitifulness, and asked what they wanted from her and why they had brought her here. She said she couldn't stand listening to their nonsense anymore, and her knees hurt. Maybe they could just let her go home now. Clen asked Alicia who the woman speaking nearby was. Alicia answered that it was Nay, one of their enemies who had attempted to kidnap Luna. Alicia also told Nay that she knew from Nellel that she was a magnetism user and had been easily captured by their allies. Nay argued that it would have been easier for her to fight back if they'd come at her with weapons. She was only weak when facing brute force and muscle. She added that their guards were easily defeated. Alicia shrugged off the conversation, as what she really wanted to know from Nay was information about what she knew of Dorel. She then gave Nay a chilling glare and demanded she honestly answer her question about Dorel's connection to the Devil Beast Kings besides Clevatess. Nay was shocked, paling, and unable to respond. She instead asked Alicia if she talked in her sleep, saying she didn't understand where her question was coming from. So, Alicia rephrased her question and asked if Nay had ever seen Dorel's devil blood. Nay still didn't understand what she meant, so Alicia explained that it was blood that came out of the body and moved around with its own will. She asked again if she had seen it, and Nay only replied that the blood she was describing sounded disgusting and that she'd never heard of blood capable of moving. After the light interrogation, Alicia told Clen that this was all Nay had said, and it seemed she wasn't lying. Nay, however, made a hostile comment in response. Clen then said he was sure Dorel had used devil blood when he fought him, and only beast kings could produce devil blood. That was why he returned. According to Clen, Dorel was just a small fry. But things were different if other Beast Kings were moving behind the scenes. Nay suddenly asked if they were testing her. Clem continued that he and Alicia needed to carefully investigate what was really going on. The two then discussed that the Beast King involved with Dorel might be Zaftir from the west, Laswell from the east, or Vordian from the north. Then, Clem released a dark, intimidating aura as Clevatess, saying that whoever among the three Beast Kings opposed him would have to pay for baring their fangs at him. Alicia, in disbelief, asked if there was even a point in Clevatess leaving his main body behind and returning to them using only Clem's body. Clem explained that he didn't want their enemies to know he had escaped the sphere. What he had left inside the sphere wasn't his real body, but a fragment he kept hidden in the shadows. According to Clem, letting the enemy think that he had been defeated would mean there would be no more fears of them finding out their location. He could go wherever he needed, making it convenient to corner their enemies. Clem then said that by continuing to pressure Dorel, the Beast King hiding behind the scenes would eventually reveal himself. Nay suddenly yelled "Hey!" loudly, having tried to get their attention for a while. She said she hadn't been able to follow their conversation. She knew nothing about Devil Blood or Beast Kings. All she knew was that Bolek came south to take the royal furnace from Haydn's capital, and she had come here with Maynard to capture the royal prince because they needed the baby for the furnace. She then asked if she could go home. But before Alicia could answer, Nay loosened her gauntlets, revealing her thin arms. Once loosened, the iron gauntlets dropped to the ground. Using magnetism, she spun them in the air, saying they were made of iron. Nay explained that her power became ineffective when iron touched her skin, so she had to remove her gauntlets whenever she used her secret technique. Clem watched closely to see what Nay was planning. Using magnetism, Nay hooked her sling bag to the iron gauntlets and launched it into the air while holding onto the bag herself. This secret technique turned out to be a quick getaway move. Surprisingly, neither Clem nor Alicia panicked. While flying, Nay spotted Phil and Pete's man-driven cart below. Riding on the cart were Nellel, Luna, and the party's baggage. Nellel expressed deep gratitude to the two brothers for letting her ride. Phil teased his older brother Pete, saying he just wanted to show off to Nellel. Pete got annoyed and told him to shut up. When Nay noticed that the royal baby prince was on this cart, she realized how convenient it was. The baby was already on a cart with iron axles, along with the super-strong Nellel. So, she immediately descended and landed on the handlebar Pete was holding, excusing herself. Phil was shocked to see her suddenly there, and Pete wondered where she had come from. Nay simply told them they were in the way. She then hurled one iron gauntlet at each brother's head, knocking them out. It worked perfectly, terrifying Nellel and Luna, who now had no protection. Nay said she'd be scolded if she returned to Dorel without results, so she would take Nellel and Luna with her on the cart as is. Before they began to fly, Nay warned the two to beware of the shaking. The entire cart lifted off the ground using Nay's magnetism on the iron axles, ascending like a helicopter. Nay warned Nellel that falling from this height could kill them. Phil and Pete woke up, but it was too late to catch the kidnapper. They could only shout, "Hey, wait." Nay said she wasn't stupid or nice enough to wait for them just because they asked. Now, she would fly full speed. But just as she said this, Clem suddenly appeared out of nowhere inside the cart, calmly sitting there and saying, "Just fly already." Nay was utterly shocked. She couldn't comprehend how or when Clem had gotten there. Then, terror struck her again when the blade of Alicia's waterfall slicer suddenly appeared in front of her. Alicia pointed her sword at her, revealing that they had prepared this cart beforehand. She and Clem had intentionally planned to use Nay's magnetism powers to fly the entire party to their destination. Nay sweated profusely in fear. Alicia thanked her, saying she and Clem didn't even have to force her to comply with what they wanted. As she drew the blade closer to her neck, Alicia told her she believed she knew her sword wasn't made of iron. Nay realized there was no escape and no excuses left. She admitted defeat and surrendered. Phil and Pete cheered as they saw their hero's party safely aboard. They bid farewell to the party and wished them a safe journey. Phil shouted loudly to the big sis that she idolized, asking her to visit them sometime, as she would always be welcome in their town. Alicia didn't respond, but smiled softly at hearing this. As they passed over the other townsfolk, Alicia received many words of gratitude and heard their trust in her as their hero returning. We see Mark, injured but alive, being helped up by Gari. He admitted he didn't really understand the circumstances of Alicia's party, but said Alicia must take care of Luna. Gari echoed her husband's words, telling Alicia not to let the child die. As the cart continued flying away from Shiron, powered by Nay as their human engine, Alicia gazed warmly at the townsfolk. Clyn ruined her moment by addressing her as servant and teasingly asking if she was satisfied with being a hero again. Alicia blushed at his teasing and yelled, "Shut up!" Nello and Luna smiled at her. Flustered, Alicia explained that she really had been a heroic hero last night and truly saved the town. Clyn replied that it was thanks to his help. Nello supported Alicia, saying she had been moved by her heroics. Truly, Alicia was a hero, just like the legends said. Nello added that she had been surprised to learn that Luna was a prince and asked if it was really okay to treat him like this. Clyn said of course it was. Why wouldn't it be? Nello said she was dirty and her social status as a slave was the lowest of the low, wondering what she should do when she finally met Luna's mother. She didn't feel confident she could even speak properly at that moment. Clyn told her he didn't understand her point of view. Wasn't status merely a matter of strength? If that was the case, Nello was hardly weak. In fact, she was several times stronger than ordinary humans. So what was there to fear? Nello didn't understand what Clyn meant. Clyn added that if Luna's mother ever looked down on her, she should just overpower her. Alicia reacted violently to Clyn's bad advice, saying one couldn't simply overpower the crown princess. Alicia and Clyn continued to argue about his plan to make Luna king and serve as the boy's aide, while Nay sat confused and dumbfounded listening to their conversation. Nay said it made sense for Alicia to protect Luna as a hero, but couldn't understand how such a ridiculous party composition had formed. A hero together with Clyn and Nello, protecting the child. Clyn overheard Nay and called her stupid, saying their party wasn't ridiculous but necessary. Each of them was needed and had a purpose. To explain further, Clyn glared intensely at Nay, leaving her speechless. Clyn then muttered, "Whatever," leaving Nay wondering what he meant. After flying a bit farther, Alicia finally spotted the mountain near Hydralt Castle. She said they'd see the castle once they passed that mountain. Nay thought to herself, whatever happens, happens. Still hostile, she told the party that if she wanted, she could just drop the three of them and keep the prince. As they approached the mountain, Nay increased the cart's altitude and sped up. Clyn then asked Alicia if she was ready to face Dorel. Alicia replied that she had been ready for a long time. Dorel was her father's enemy. Clyn reminded Alicia that he needed to hide the details about his true identity, as well as the devil blood within her body. Thus, he could not interfere in the upcoming confrontation. Alicia said she already knew that. Her objective here was to expose Dorel's true identity. After crossing over the mountain, they finally arrived at Hydralt and saw the ongoing siege battle. Alicia immediately searched for Dorel, and when she spotted an explosion atop part of the walls, she saw an armored figure engulfed in flames. It was none other than General Dorel himself. She then prepared herself to fight and pointed towards his direction to charge.